Now, this Aero 14 by Gigabyte isn't the newest laptop, but I still wanted to give it a quick review as the price really came down lately, and I was quite interested in this little 14-inch powerhouse, because it is a really versatile laptop, so let's talk about that.
This is Hubwood.
The Aero 14 is a really well-built, little and lightweight laptop that sports an i7 13620H and the RTX 4050 in the low-powered 35-watt version, which can go up to 45 watt with dynamic boost. Furthermore, it is paired with 16GB of DDR5 5200 MB transfer RAM and a 512GB SSD, while it is also available with a slightly faster 13700H and a 1TB SSD instead. Furthermore, it comes with a very fast Wi-Fi 6E and a Bluetooth 5.2 adapter. Now, the Gigabyte Aero 14 originally was built with creators in mind, just like the Gigabyte Aero series in general, with its amazing 16:10 90Hz 3K OLED screen, but now as it's only around $1,200 and even only 1,100 euros, instead of the original $1,700 versus 1,999 euros, I think it's really worth a thought for students, all-rounders and casual gamers as well. And it's clearly an alternative to something like the Acer Swift X14. Now, I really like the very subtle design and how sturdy it just is. It comes with a full silverish aluminum chassis that feels very tight. The display seems to be very stable, and even the keyboard flex is one of the best and tightest I have seen so far. It only weighs around 1.4 kg and the USB-C charger adds another 550 gram, but you can almost likely leave the charger at home for a day of work or at the university, since for its 63 Wh battery I got up to 13.7 hours of idle runtime with 20% brightness of the display plus Wi-Fi activated, and around 7.7 hours watching YouTube with 50% brightness plus Wi-Fi, meaning you should really be able to get around 8 hours for browsing and light office workloads. For that, you just need to make sure to activate the AI boost in the control center, because otherwise it could use more watt for the CPU on the go. The good thing about this Aero 14 only having the 35 watt/45 watt with dynamic boost version of the RTX 4050 is that it's even able to run games on battery. In a way, they are actually playable, though with less performance than plugged in, while of course the battery will drain pretty quickly that way. Opening the display lid with one hand works like a charm, and the hinge just works buttery smooth, but the maximum opening angle should be a bit wider. The white illuminated keyboard has a great key travel of 1.7 mm and feels really good, well built and valuable, just like the big centered touchpad does as well. The 16:10 aspect ratio display is really nice and surely one of the Aero 14's highlights. It has a resolution of 2880 by 1800 pixel, and I measured a decent maximum brightness of very bright 550 nits. It comes with a 90Hz refresh rate, which isn't 120 but noticeably faster and more responsive than 60Hz screens for sure. A good compromise for a laptop for creatives and also a plus for gaming. Here are the numbers for the measured color accuracy I've measured myself. 100% for sRGB, 92% for NTSC, 94% for Adobe sRGB, and 100% for the P3 color space. And it is also HDR VESA TrueBlack 600 certified. Be aware that the screen is quite reflective though. While an aluminum metal chassis does help with dissipating the heat, that also means that the bottom of the Aero 14 does get really warm, if not even hot after a while of heavy usage. The keyboard and especially the WASD keys over here aren't affected though, as the fans are basically exactly below them, while the palm rest gets a bit warm but not uncomfortably in my opinion. I didn't experience throttling issues, and the laptop is able to maintain around 90 degrees Celsius for the CPU after running on 100% CPU load for a while. In games, both CPU and GPU hover around 72 degrees Celsius on a laptop stand and a room temperature of around 21 degrees Celsius. It has 4 air grids in total, 1 on each side and 2 at the back. Fresh air is sucked in from beneath the laptop, so lifting it up a bit, for example with a laptop stand, surely helps the cooling system to get some fresh air. While the fans never completely shut down, on idle, and even watching 4K videos using the quiet mode, it's basically unhearable and won't disturb you or people around you. Though, under full gaming load, it is hearable, but in my opinion still acceptable. Only under extreme situations when you fully utilize both the CPU and the GPU, it gets really loud. But playing Cyberpunk 2077 isn't actually that bad with around 42 decibel. PS, the speakers are okay, I guess. They lack bass, but the sound is stable and can get quite loud. PS, this is what the integrated camera looks like and what the integrated microphone sounds like. And this is what it sounds like when I'm typing on the keyboard while recording. What I liked about the ports is that the HDMI port and the USB-A port are at the back. On the left side it has a USB-C port that is also used for charging the laptop. I was able to use it with my 65 watt Ugreen USB-C charger as well. It was also possible to use a dock on this port to charge it and use external drives at the same time. Furthermore, we get a very fast micro SD card slot and a 3.5mm audio jack. And on the right side we get 2 USB-C Thunderbolt ports with DisplayPort compatibility. But there is no LAN port, so you would need a dock or hub or an adapter for that. My 65 watt power bank didn't work as intended though. It prevented the battery from draining, but it didn't load or charge the laptop. And the CPU performance was throttled that way. But everyday performance usually is of course great. It booted up into Windows in an insanely fast 14 seconds on a freshly installed system. The SSD has a decent reading speed of around 3.7 GB per second and writing speeds of around 2 GB per second. In Cinebench R23 I got around 12,850 points for the multi-core score in the first run, which isn't very high due to the i7 only running at 40 watt for PL2, and around 1,800 points for the single core score, which on the other hand is still a very decent score. For PC Mark X, it achieved around 6,900 points. And I also compared it with the Acer Swift X for Blender, and since they both sport the 45 watt RTX 4050, the results have been identical. So Blender is very usable and quite close to a full powered RTX 4050. For the Blender benchmark, it scored 2,002 points. And I also ran a couple of newer games on this Aero 14 to see how the 45 watt RTX 4050 holds up around 1.5 years after its release. And before we look at the games, here are the results of the 3D Mark benchmarks. For Firestrike, it scored a total of 14,471 points. For Steel Nomad Light, I saw 6,215 points. And in TimeSpy, it was able to score 6,645 points. I actually recorded the games via a camera, since I can't record 16:10 in a good way via my capture card. For all of today's tested games I used 1200p instead of 1800p, which still looks very good on the 14-inch screen, even with additional upscaling techniques activated. In CS2 I saw an average of 180 FPS at 1200p and low settings, while FSR was turned off. The 1% lows are once again a bit low in CS2, but that's just the game engine, and it was pretty smooth without noticeable stuttering. Perfectly playable even for a bit more sophisticated gamers. For Cyberpunk 2077 I was also using 1200p, but this time with medium settings plus DLSS on quality and frame generation activated. That resulted in an average of 90 FPS, meaning you can actually make good use of the 90Hz screen in this example. The 1% lows have been surprisingly good as well, with around 64 FPS, so the game felt very fluid and just perfectly playable. In Fortnite I saw a high average of 154 FPS with 1% lows of around 86 FPS, but the 1% lows will be higher after a few more matches. I used medium settings with DirectX 12 since the game just looks already really nice that way, and DLSS was activated on balanced mode as well. Perfectly playable once more, really smooth experience, and the game just looks great on the OLED screen. For Star Wars Outlaws, I was using medium settings again, also at 1200p, with activated DLSS on quality and frame generation that resulted in 60 to 80 FPS on average, depending on the area, and 1% loss of between 35 and 55 FPS. The game still looks great on that 14-inch screen and is just perfectly enjoyable. And Helldivers 2 ran perfectly fine as well at 1200p with medium settings and the resolution scaling set to quality. 72 FPS on average and 1% loss of 55 FPS allow for an enjoyable experience with decent visuals once more. So overall, it's kinda safe to say that this little 14-inch notebook can manage even recent AAA titles just alright. So overall, this is a really nice 14-inch Allrounder with only a few flaws, like maybe the fan noise on the highest performance mode, the missing LAN port, and of course the fact that it only sports 16 GB of RAM, which is still okay for gaming, but especially for sophisticated video editing or 3D rendering, this will become an issue for complexer projects. Considering its original price, it's clear that this is in fact a higher class / premium product that you can now get with a huge discount, maybe even more at Black Friday or Black Week. And you can really feel, see and hear that. I'm not necessarily talking about the pure performance, but the materials and the quality overall. So I would consider this a good deal right now. Just one of these 2023 models that might make more sense than a brand new version. And that's all for today's video. If you like the content, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and tschüss.